And we start off our meetings that way as a reminder that what we are doing here all fits into a bigger context. And one of our agreements, we're all in this together. And when we say that, we mean here and here. And so just take a moment. Actually, I'm going to invite you to take a nice cleansing breath. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable. And I'm going to invite you to see yourself in the landscape where you are. So take a moment to, in your mind's eye, locate yourself in the room where you are, and locate that room in the building that you are in. And then locate that building as it sits on the land. And draw your attention to the north. Think of the relations and the landscape that lies in that direction. And cast your attention to the east. What part of your body faces or is in the direction of the east? What lies in that direction? And to the south. And finally to the west. And then take a deep breath in, drawing in all of your connections from all the four directions in the earth and sky. And as you exhale, let go of anything that keeps you from being present with us today. And then when you're ready, just come join us back in the circle. All righty. So this is the part of our charrette when we actually start to get into proposals. And just to give us a little bit of context, I will share with you all some of the work that has gone into getting us here. Some of this will look familiar from what Ronnie was presenting, but we use fractal planning where we break things down from the high level long term into the immediate and actionable. So we break our annual plan down, what we're doing today with the charrette. We'll break that down into seasonal plans for each of the guilds. And then those get broken down into sprints, usually 2 weeks at a time, where we get down to the who does what by when. And then we factor that back, our experience of doing that work. We factor it back, reflect on our seasonal plans, and then reflect on our annual plans so that we are aiming, acting, and reflecting in a way that we get smarter as we do it. And the process itself, the annual review process, started last, I guess, actually November or December. First of all, each of the guilds review their progress based on their plan from last year. What were the activities they took part in? What did they learn from those activities? What were some of the impacts that we had? And what direction does that point us in? We took those individual guild reports, and then at the coordination circle, we reviewed them all together, and we pulled out what are the themes that we're noticing, what's the kind of way of reading all of these individual reports to make sense of them. That got forwarded to the Stewardship Council meeting, which happened in December, where we sequentially looked at our activities from last year and what we're learning, and then we looked forward to where does it make sense to put our effort. And one of the sociocracy principles is effectiveness. And the way Ronnie described it is what's the 20 that gets you 80. So at the Stewardship Council level, we looked at what feel like the areas that would have the most positive impact on us moving forward. And those were turned into requests for proposals, RFPs. And the RFPs then were sent out to the guilds, and each of the guilds had a chance to think about their work in relationship to those overall goals and where could they contribute. And that's what we're here to discuss today at this point is those guild proposals. And then this afternoon, we'll do the coordination circle. where we take those proposals and we weave them together. We make sure that kind of take the long view, take a step back, make sure that we're doing what we need to do. We're not missing anything. We're not taking on a challenge that's too big for us, and that we have integrated things good enough for now, safe enough for to try. So that's the process. And as Ronnie mentioned, the guilds, we think of them as organs in an organism as part of an ecosystem. So every organ is in some sense an organism. Every organism is in some sense part of a larger system. And as such, we recognize that the guilds have unique functions, but those functions are interdependent. And the way in 2024, we really established the guilds as they are now, more or less. And so we have a Heartwork Guild. We had a Governance Guild, which has morphed into Research and Learning. We have a Finance and Legal Guild, Farm, Food and Housing, and Outreach and Network. And each of those have their particular functions. Heartwork is really about opportunities to deepen relationships. Research and Learning is about onboarding and restorative practices. Finance and Legal is about navigating, we call it transition economics, navigating our current legal situation so that we can do what we're wanting to do. And the farm is really focused on the physical part of it, which is the farm is actually the pharmastery, and we'll talk about that. So it's more than just the physical, but it's really thinking about how does this interact with the land itself, and not just in the cyber world. And then outreach and networking is really about reaching out, spreading the word, piquing curiosity, and bringing people back into the lifeboat. So as part of our annual review, we looked at a number of different things. We looked at our activities, what each of the guilds got up to. We launched and did several cycles of the Connect the Dots Club, which included 14 different meetings, each of which was run as a circle, which had some really deep conversations, but also produced some products in terms of our mirror board, where we've captured a lot of our favorite references. That's part of the 2025 Lifeboat Builder process. We did our first fall semester where we tried to organize all of the different support structures that we are offering to lifeboat builders and offer it in a systematized and linear way, which is grown into the 2025 Lifeboat Circle process. We held a series of agreement circles and navigation sessions. We've done a lot of work on establishing our bylaws, and we also did a lot of sort of ongoing stuff in terms of regular communications, social media posts, newsletters, keeping up on top of email communications. We've also been working on a podcast with Andy. We did a lot of work there in developing that. And we've done a lot of work on the farm, just in building the garden beds and clearing the brambles and getting our food production growing. And we also did a series of webinars and in-person opportunities for onboarding. I think we did something well over half a dozen, something like 10 different webinars over the last year. So those activities created some impact. And I will say we also have an annual report, which anyone is in the spirit of transparency. If anybody wants to go into the details of this, we have our annual report, which is open to everybody. So we have 8 areas that we are trying to create impact, and we identified impact in each of those 8 areas, multiple kinds of impact in all of those areas. Many of them are, baby steps. So we're not necessarily, for example, we don't have long-term tenure to be able to afford access to the land for farmers, but we were able to create spots for 10 woofers over the space of the summer. And a number of those sort of, baby steps towards these higher level impacts that we're hoping to create. And we took some time to gather our lessons learned, and and those really were intended to set the foundation for where we go in 2025. So how do we build on the strengths? How do we build on the things that we're learning through experience? And we'll probably talk about how these come up in the proposals. At this point, I think it's more important to say we took the time to think about the components that really are most important and making sure that they're factored in as we move forward. And in terms of some shifts in our thinking, not new, but deepening appreciation of reciprocity and relationality as really fundamental to everything that we do, and some refinements in how the guilds, the responsibilities happen in the guilds. So those were the lessons that we took. And then for the Stewardship Council, then we took the long view of where are the key areas that we want to see movement in 2025. So, one of those areas was we want to see more cross-pollination between the guilds. So each guild has a sort of standing order to think about what are they learning in their guild that they might want to share with the other guilds that might be useful. We recognize the value of the conversations that happen almost every time we meet, even when we're having a guild meeting, business meeting. A lot of times there are really valuable insights and ideas that come out, and how do we share them out to a broader audience in a way that hopefully builds our engagement, builds the number of people who want to get involved. We also recognize the importance of the pharmastery aspect of here, the physical property on Cedeus, on Pender Island. And I think this ties in part to the experiential side of it. It's one thing to talk about interdependence and interconnection. It's something else entirely to live it. And the value of creating those direct experiences, the transformative power of being able to provide those experiences more to more people. Key, this is I hope this does not show up on our 2026 charrette, but we are, it always feels like we're about 5 yards from the goal line on getting the legal structure done. And it still feels like we're there. We're, 5 yards from the finish line. And so hopefully we will, and there are so many things that are dependent on that getting finalized before they can move forward. So that's definitely a high level goal, a high value goal for 2025. Creating the infrastructure plan for the farm and the pharmastery would be really useful, and is tricky because of questions about financing and legal tenure and that sort of thing. And advancing the research project, which is really as much about networks as anything else. It's really about figuring out how do we want to connect with other similar networks that we know about, are friends with, and how do we work in a way that is mutually beneficial. And of course, we've got a new pretty much full cohort of lifeboat builders for 2025. So each of the guilds has also been tasked with thinking about what kinds of supports and how do you support lifeboat builders in their work. And then a general across the board, not necessarily that there's a specific ask here, but how do we continue to deepen engagement and reciprocity in all the work that we do? So that's where we are right now, is the Stewardship Council has given the RFPs to the guilds. The guilds have each met to talk about how they want to respond, and today we are here to hear the proposals. We'll hear them in order of we have a random order that we've established for the guilds. So we'll start with heart work, then research, finance, farm, and outreach. And there will be time at the end if anybody wants to put forward another proposal, a personal proposal. And each of the guilds can present, and we'll have questions for clarification, but we won't get into any discussion this morning about how things fit together or any of those, sort of uh, weaving things together. That'll happen this afternoon when we come back together for the coordination circle. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And any questions before we get into the actual proposals? Hearing none, I think we're good to go. And so first up, heart work and philosophy. So that would be April and Roland, and I will bring up the proposal and share it. Actually, all right. Take it away, April and/or Roland. You can rock, paper, scissors.
Shall I start, Roland, and then pass over to you?
Actually, would you mind doing this one? And I will do the farm one. And it'll mix up the voices a little bit, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I like to be mixed up in any way that we can.
Thank you.
So there were several areas that came out of considerations from the Stewardship Council that we wanted to do some work in, and they were to follow up with guild cross-pollinization, something that we've been thinking about a lot, but want to think more deeply, and then supporting the 2025 Lifeboat Academy cohort, sharing conversations, seeing what it is that what learning opportunities would be useful for that group of people, and then supporting the pharmastery idea, what that means, how we do it in a practical way. So we came up then with a set of activities. And as it says here, some of them we started already in 2024 and have had successful run-throughs of our experiments, and then a couple of new things for this coming year. So the Connect the Dots meetings that we did a goodly number of will be continued. And that actually works to connect people to our resources and to each other, and to sort of provide throughput on the background to what we're doing, I think. Agreement circles are another core and fundamental part of our work. And so there will be continued circles, both online and in person. And again, meant to support the cohort. The new activities are to continue to take the lessons learned, to identify them, and then to figure out what to do with what it is that we've learned. And particularly the learning from hosting Connect the Dots Club and the Agreements Circles, because there's lots of material there really around what is engagement, how do we do it better, how do we make it open and invitational, and then what is the reciprocity that we're called on. So what do we have to offer? What do we want from other groups, other folks, and other guilds? And thinking that there probably is a checklist that we can outline. that might be useful and will keep us on track with that. So pulling out the promising approaches, identifying what did not work, and figure out how to go forward with that. And this provides a foundation for other work that we were thinking about, including proposing a retreat for the Farmer's Dairy. So that is something that happens in person. Think through how we could host an on-site retreat and at least one live event that will showcase how it is that we work and why it is that we work in the way that we do from the Heartwork perspective. So we need to do planning, then trial what it is that we've planned, and see how that works out. So a pilot project, really figuring out the nitty-gritty, how many people would we have at a retreat, how long would it last, and so on. And how do we ensure reciprocity as part of that? And you'll see reciprocity occurring as a continuing theme through this. We're exploring it probably in all the guilds, but certainly we've been fascinated with it and want to deeply engage with reciprocity, the idea and the practice in the Heartwork Guild. So we thought a bit about how do we measure success for this. So how many people might express an interest in connecting the dots or the agreement circles, positive reports and feedback, and use the takeaways that happen at the end of the event, noting the themes that continue to come up. And the success of the checklist that we're going to develop will be measured by whether anybody uses it and finding out from each guild what's useful, what isn't useful. So basic sort of analysis of some feedback there. And success of the farm retreat will be the usual things such as, did we get our target numbers or how close did we come to that? And what did participants say about their experience? We don't quite know how we're going to collect that yet, but we think that's a really core part to this. And then make this real by trying it all over again. So repeating the experiment to see that the next retreat is even more successful. So there's lots of unknowns in this, lots of elements beyond our control, but that shouldn't stop us from making an attempt to have an event that's really that we learn from and that provides for some extra needs. We do know that most of our operations are virtual at the moment, and so having on-site, in-person operations has some challenges with it. And we will cooperate with the Farm Guild on how to do all of this. And can we spread our learning in any other way? So we thought a bit about who else, in terms of guild activity, would be that we were working with. And so then we need to develop questions around what it is that we will be doing with each of the guilds and come to some conclusions after we kind of get the relationships established and understand the reciprocity in the relationships. What are we doing for other guilds for their projects as well? That I think covered.
I think that's it. So questions for clarification, and we'll just do this popcorn style. So either raise your hand or just unmute.
I just wanted to comment something that I was noticing using that is the Lifeboat Academy principles that were at play in what was being presented. And what really stood out for me was, iterative learning from experience, the AIM Act reflect. So the purpose, for example, the purpose of having some feedback from people who come to the pharmastery is so that every time we get either confirmation or suggestions for improvements, or whatever other kind of information we can get from that feedback. So just what I was noticing, and yes.
The other thing I just want to comment on is that I think that the way that we've gone through this, the process with which we've approached this, reflects the principles of sociocracy principles, and I actually hadn't realized how much that was true about this process until just now.
Mhm. Any other questions for clarification or comments, additions? Heather? I see you looking for the unmute. That's how I knew.
Well, I was trying to do it on my little picture and it wouldn't, and instead of doing it down there on the left hand, it was just a thought that I had, and that is that doing an in-person kind of event is to be sure that I'm just thinking from my place as an 82-year-old who's whose physical ability to participate in the hard work of a farm is, I really noticed how much I can't do.
Mm.
And I'm really wanting young people who are actually in the place of being able to do that work to be invited and to be sought out. I think there's always a danger in the work I do that those people are not included.
Mm.
And if you're going to have an on-farm thing, where is the generation that's going to come and grow the food?
Yeah, what that elicits from me is um what is it that every generation has something to offer,
Yes.
and what is it that we need to demonstrate that offers a space for each generation? Like what did they need to either to know that they're invited, but also that there is something here for them? And that is a question I think that is that I would add as part of the deliberations for the Hard Work Guild.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
actually, that's actually sort of shared with outreach as well, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And as Ben says, it's both and. It's not either or. It's not either Heather comes or you find a young agrarian who wants to attend. It's maybe Heather attends and the young agrarian attends.
Right.
But you're
Yeah.
more likely, I think, at this point to attract people like myself. I don't know if that's true.
Well, and I'm going to park this because we want to just do questions for clarification this morning, but I think this is a great, these are the things to write down, because this afternoon, this is what we want to get into. All of these ideas for improvements and interconnections. All right, any other clarification questions? Right, then I'm going to move on to...
Actually, could I just ask, Ben, could this document link be put in the chat
yeah.
to look over? I think it's going to take me a while to assimilate.
And hopefully permission settings are set right. If they aren't, just let us know and it's always hard to keep on top of permission settings. All right, so for the Research and Learning Guild, and I'll put this link in as well. So there are two projects that kind of fall under Research and Learning, and a little bit of background. The Governance and Principles Guild, part of the reason why we reformulated it was we didn't get any uptake other than me. So I was a one-person guild for last year. And so the two proposals that are coming out are also in the spirit of trying to extend interest and engagement in the newly formed Research and Learning Guild. The two proposals are the badging system and the research project. And the badging system, it has kind of a formal structure to it, and the research project is still very nebulous. So for the badging system, the inspiration behind it was that we are hoping the badges will help people share existing skills, develop new skills, and for us to create kind of an inventory of the skills that are available to us. So that it's both for personal development and for organizational development. We think that it'll make it easier for us to find the people that have the skills available. So that'll make it easier to share out responsibilities. We'll know who is capable of taking on some of the tasks when they come up. It will also hopefully provide an easier way for people to find their path into the lifeboat. So you know what kinds of skills we're looking for. And even if you don't have those skills, there's a clear pathway for developing them. And that is also, I think, a lot of why people might want to get involved. Earlier, several times we've talked about working in the guilds is a really great way of developing skills, and the badge list will make those skills really explicit. So some of the things that will be indicators of it working well is that each of the guilds will take on their own badges, so that there will be kind of distributed leadership and distributed administration, so that it doesn't all fall on one person or one guild. And that there's a one-for-one correspondence between the responsibilities that are identified in the driver statements and the skills necessary to manage those responsibilities. And that there is an easy to use system so that you can find what those badges are. And, it's easy for someone to be able to find the badges they might be interested in learning, or the people that already have those badges. And ultimately, the measure will be how enthusiastic are people about earning new badges. And yeah, I think that pretty much is it. Some of the concerns that we identified in terms of getting the scale right, we don't want to have too many badges, because then it's just too much information is just as opaque as too little information in terms of transparency. So finding the right balance point. Likewise around tracking, how do we keep, writing things down is easy. Being able to find what you wrote down later is hard. So how do we set up the system in a way that it doesn't feel onerous or complicated? And there is a potential for people to start developing badges just for fun, and so how do we make sure that the badges stay focused on what are the essential skills for doing the work? Basically everyone is affected by this, because each of the guilds will be developing their own badges, with some shared. And thank you, Ronnie. So yeah, everyone is affected in that the Curiosity Guild will be establishing the system, but then each of the guilds needs to take up the work to make that happen. We see it happening in a couple steps. The first one is creating sort of the first list of badges. Or how we need to have an agreed upon framework for what's the right scale for the badge. How do we go about establishing that? And basically that I, as the caretaker for the Curiosity Guild, would work with each of the guilds to help them identify what are the core skills, and we could have basically a little coaching back and forth to get them to the right number, and the key ones to start with, and then break down the badge into what are some of the component parts of that, kind of break it down. We've been thinking in general that each badge would have 3 to 6 activities. And as April was mentioning tokens, that part of that would be what are some observable behaviors that indicate that you're developing the skill so that other people could recognize, oh, look, you're doing that good thing. Here's a token. And that there would be clear instructions for each of the skills, not necessarily everything under the sun, but a checklist that would make it clear what the expectations are, and they could reference other material if there was, something that you needed. For example, chicken health is one of the badges, and there's a lot in chicken health, which we can link with some outside reference materials. Here's a diagnostic guide to seeing whether or not a chicken looks healthy. And then each of the badges would also have a skill level associated with it, beginner, intermediate, and advanced, so that it's clear where people start and how they build up from there. And right, and then the way of earning the badges, we've already talked about that. It's a series of shadowing, so people shadow until they feel comfortable. This is to take it out of book learning and make it experiential, and also relational, so that you're working with somebody or a set of people. So hopefully you can shadow for more complicated things. You may shadow more than one person to see how different people accomplish the same thing. And then once you earn your badge, then the next expectation is that you would show somebody else. So partly so that the skills are passed along, but also as a way of really anchoring in the skill, because the best way to learn is to teach.
Mhm.
And then yeah, basically once we establish that, then each of the guilds would kind of set up a mini experiment on what are some of the badges you want to start with, and identify who has that skill already and who is interested in learning that skill. And we'll trial the system and see how it works. And as part of that, the Curiosity Guild would set up some sort of tracking system, basically probably a spreadsheet or something similar, and then provide coaching and instruction to all of probably the caretakers in each of the guilds for how to use that tracking system. And then we run the experiment and we see how it goes. And ideally, we would actually set a time for a debriefing. Once we know what the guild experiments are, then set, say, 3 months in the future where we do a debriefing kind of exercise. And these, I think I've covered that already. And actually, the one thing too, just to kind of give a sense of what we're thinking badges could look like. So the caretaker role for each of the guilds has a number of skills associated with it. So one thing is just being the convener, bringing people together, scheduling the meetings, setting reminders, getting people in the right space at the right time. Then there's the skill of in the meeting actually being the facilitator, of making sure that the meeting flows, that you're staying on topic, that all the agenda items are where they need to be. There's a record keeping set of skills. So how do we keep the notes that we need in a way that are accessible? There is a strategizer skill set in figuring out how do you prioritize agenda items and keep people focused on the 20 gets 80. And then there's also the messenger of, how do we make sure that what's going on in the guild is known to the other guilds and to the coordination circle. So this is the idea, is that convener might be a badge, and these are the 3 skills, and they're all demonstratable. And you shadow somebody until you do it, and then when you do it, you get your badge. So that's the badging proposal. And any questions for clarification?
Yeah, is there something in sociocracy that would fit in with the badging system where, you know, you're having a discussion, you're going through um, um, uh, um, either objections or considerations, and then you get to point to your badge and say, I have the badge. I know more than you do.
Well, I
The
think
boss, I can boss you around because I've got the badge. Can we have that?
you know you
Oh,
joke, but I do think that it would be really interesting to go through sociocracy and figure out what are the badges there, because gathering considerations is important, and that's partly facilitation is also, you know, keeping people on topic. Um, so I think, yeah, there's a set of sociocracy badges, and there is something to a lot of times we talk about facilitation. You're a process Nazi and content neutral, but you know that your job is really to keep people on task. But then within that, you allow and there's always a judgment. But there is something about being able to kind of point to the badge and say, this is not the time for that, um, and not get into a debate. So yeah, that's a good point. Other questions for clarification?
I don't know if this is a question for clarification, but number one, I love the idea of a badge. And the first time that you talked about badges, I just remembered being a brownie and having the little badge that I could sew, my mother could sew onto my uniform. And I love the fact that it was embroidered with, like I'd learned how to build a campfire kind of. And so that's very strong in my mind. And I'm thinking of something that is in recognition or celebration or something that's physical that could actually you know, acknowledge that we had these badges,
Mhm.
and not just virtual or whatever. So I just
Mhm.
wondered if you had thought of that and if that's something that people, you know, feel would be really kind of like celebratory sort of thing.
Yeah, we've had that thought. We don't have it. We don't know exactly how it's going to happen. There's a lot of steps in that. Like first we need to know what the badges are, then we need to design what they
Yeah.
look like, and then figure out what is the physicality. Is it a virtual? I mean, it's still physical, but you get a dot on your profile or, you know, but I think we're all liking fun, the celebratory and fun part of it, that you could have.
Recognition that, yeah.
Yeah, you could actually have sashes. I mean, how much fun would that be to show up at like the Charrette with your sash, you
You
know?
know, things on the sash or whatever it is.
And on the
Yeah.
Yeah.
farm, you could see, like, if everybody had a sash, you could see who are the chicken people. Like, who can you go to with a chicken question? Who could you go to with a goat question? Like, that would just be so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I encourage us to do something like that, that's a physical recognition. I think it's great.
Like
And then
tattoo.
it can come out in different ways too as well.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really like what you said, Ronnie, about them having the function of signaling a certain level of expertise that other people can draw on, rather than it being because you're talking to a traumatized individual through that hierarchy of badges and all of these kinds of things, and like I'm the best and so on. But in terms of it signaling um, who to go to about that chicken question, who to, you know,
Mhm.
like these are the people who have reservoirs of knowledge and experience that can be drawn on. That really resonates with me.
Mhm. Rolanda, do you have something you wanted to add? Okay. Any other questions for clarification or comments?
Is this the place, Ben, to mention that we had the idea of having a badge cocktail party at the end of after 3 o'clock this afternoon for anyone that's interested in exploring more deeply with virtual cocktails what badges mean. So a chance to ask more questions about it and to have short conversations in a very casual way.
Yeah. I think definitely. And that's the other part of this is, like Ronnie mentioned earlier, we've been talking about badges for a while. And so I think there's a lot of disorganized thoughts right now. So, there already are some ideas for what some of the badges might be, and figuring, so we're not starting from scratch. So yeah. Any other comments, questions? Okay. And I will say the research proposal is at this point not fleshed out enough to really present in a way, and it depends in part on whether or not there is interest in other people joining the research guild. So up next is finance and legal. And the report there is actually quite simple. The update is we currently have bylaws written, and we have a perennial challenge about how do we balance in our transition economics and the current legal system, private property ideas, and the idea that if I'm showing up with money, I get special privileges, is really strongly integrated into our legal system, and we're trying to figure out how to work around that in the bylaws. And there are some balance points around what we may have to compromise on to be able to get what we're trying to get. And the next step is really we're working with lawyers who are not necessarily helping us create solutions. And what we want to do is lean into some of our legal friends for second opinions on the opinions that we're getting from our lawyers, and seeing if there's any clever solutions that we can move forward. So we're at the place right now where it feels like we've got something that we could go forward with if we needed to. That might be the best that we can come up with, and we're looking to see if there are maybe some tweaks that can make it better. And once that happens, the next steps would be finding subscribers, so that when we actually file, we need people that are going to sign on the bottom line as being, founding members of the co-op or whatever form it takes. And once that happens, we actually have a whole bunch of material lined up so that we can start doing informational sessions and, talk to potential investors and talk to stakeholders. We've got all those materials ready. We're just waiting to have something like, this is what you would sign. So questions and the other part is, even though we don't think hopefully that won't take the whole year, we don't want to put forward any other initiatives until that's done. Once that's done, finance and legal will regroup and figure out where's our effort, best spent. But right now, that's our sole focus, and until that gets changed, we won't consider anything else. So any questions or comments? I would add the fundamental comment of Shakespeare was right, first kill all the lawyers, and moving on. So next up is farm, food, and housing. So Roland, over to you. And you're muted.
Thanks. I think we're primarily focusing on the pharmastery idea, and the different aspects, primarily in terms of the physicality of the place, of the space. So first is, how do we explain what the pharmastery is to be able to start to get the word out? And uh, uh, and there's this interesting also and kind of situation where part of the pharmastery is people who come to have the experience of being at the pharmastery. So it is doing work for the farm in part. And on the other side, the attraction to come to work on the pharmastery is that there is a working farm. And we're still building towards that. So it's figuring out what's the biggest, like it said, it says there, what's the biggest bang for the buck in terms of infrastructure improvements that we can do. And in sort of starting to talk about it a little bit, it is mostly having to do with housing and the different aspects of housing people and how many people and so on. So the I guess the first thing that we need to do is actually develop the plan. What's the answering the difficult questions around what we need in place, and what are we developing with the pharmastery guests. And there's also enumerating the different types of guests, because there are woofers, and then there's also the potential for income for the pharmastery, and ultimately for the Lifeboat Academy, with retreats and individual guests. And so then it is all of this in terms of relationship of reciprocity with other guilds. It is what from the experience that we've had so far with the farm food and housing guild, that we can share with other guilds. And one of them is the lessons that we've learned from our woofing experiences. There's some interesting insights that came from comments and conversations with woofers that we had last year. And in terms of the farm and the pharmastery, it is inventorying what we have to get a better idea of how we want to build out from there. Keeping in consideration, the sort of shifting sands of our situation, in terms of starting something on the physical place when we don't yet have certainty of tenure on the land here. And ultimately, since we're working with the physical space, it is being aware of and making sure that we're building in ways of interacting with the ecosystem that we are now part of in this place, in a respectful way. When we are producing food for ourselves, when we are thinking about housing and interactions with the outside world, that permeable boundary of not just products coming onto the farm and leaving the farm, but also humans, people coming and going. And what success would look like right now is decreasing the external outputs, external inputs to the farm. So that is depending less on the grocery store for food, producing more food, and potentially to the extent where we can start sharing outwards. and being more, we need to tighten up our system around responding and receiving woofers. In terms of physical work, they are incredibly productive and enthusiastic, and that is energy for us also. And increasing guests, and in terms of concerns, like I mentioned, it's the uncertainty around tenure. It is trying to figure out how to fund these projects. And the woofers is wonderful, and they are not yet present enough to have a continuous presence and a continuous resource in terms of help. And I will add in there the possibility of having guests other than woofers also being part of that pool. And in trying to think about who's affected, and I think this is a lot, what's the relationship, or what's the reciprocity potential, and Heartwork has been mentioned in the presentation for Heartwork. Heartwork is thinking of retreat that the pharmastery that could be hosted here at 9891 Spalding. For finance and legal, this is less direct, but finalizing the bylaws and establishing tenure. And because it has to do with finance, that collaborating to work towards fundraising to be able to do sort of material improvements on the land here. And outreach and network, of course, it's spreading the word, working out a strategy to increase the visits and attendance. I already found some interesting websites for, since I think you talked about the pharmastery idea earlier today. I've been looking at retreat monasteries where people go to help to actually do work on the monastery. So there could be some interesting models that we can look at there. And in terms of the Research and Learning Guild, it's help in developing tracking systems. There's a number of things that, like actually physical tracking of relations on the land here, including water, and in the gardens, but also in terms of the finances and the types of feedback that we're looking for from guests. And connected projects. Do we have anything under there?
No.
We're good.
Yeah. Cool.
Any questions or comments?
The one comment I want to make is I think there's also this is just a personal thing. The pharmastery, I'm inspired by the conversation we had last night to really, and Heather, planting a seed with you that maybe the way forward is we actually form as a religious society. And that because we are talking about this has all of the trappings of a religious monastery, and so that kind of gets around all of these questions of making a profit, and investors become benefactors and endowments and things like that. Anyhow, so just an idea of, I think that where there might be some integration between finance and legal and the developing the pharmastery idea. Any other questions for clarification or comments?
what I've noticed about myself is that the juices start to roll or bubble up when I hear the report from the pharmacy. More so than the finance and legal. I kind of that's probably where my heart is and my deepest experiences. I think finance and legal I've learned because of necessity, not because of it's deeply in my heart. So I am resistant to join the guild. But I'm looking for ways that maybe I could have conversations about, all the experience I've had with, how do we attract people in a more permanent way, maybe.
Mhm.
I think that with things like woofers, it's a very temporary thing. And
Yeah.
what we're really wanting to do is to attract people who are going to want to stay and belong and live there. So
Yeah.
I'm offering that some kind of format where we can have that conversation.
That would be much appreciated. And we agree, and this is the issue with tenure. And we've had conversations with potential partners, and a lot of times it's the uncertainty. I would say almost every time, I think it's been more or less the uncertainty of being able to stay that people just they don't want to place a bet on it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
understood.
often it's people who already have experienced uncertainty because of having lost market gardens or having housing insecurity, and so entering a project that is again providing uncertainty is often what is a deterrent. But I realize that I'm starting a conversation, and what this is just the presentation part, so I'll stop.
Thanks. Any last questions before moving on to outreach? All righty. Clicking right away. Over to you, Ronnie.
Could I actually share my screen so that I can drive?
Sure.
Thank you. Cool. So the goals that outreach has been tasked with reaching for this year are leveraging the conversations that we have already within the Lifeboat Academy to be able to share them out and increase interest in what we're doing, um, as well as increasing the number of people who are visiting the pharmacery, getting involved on the ground, and figuring out how to convert those experiences into testimonials that we can share with other people, as well as increasing engagement and positive experiences among lifeboat builders, and growing our base of support there. And then kind of taking all of the above and converting that into longer term engagement and material support for the Lifeboat Academy. So actually seeing financial contributions coming in, which will in turn enable the pharmacery operations to grow, it'll help secure the purchase of the property, etc. So we brought these goals to the guild, and through our circle process, we identified storytelling as a central concept to helping us share out the experiences that people are having about how the being involved with the academy affects their lives. So our proposal is to begin collecting these stories from people who are participating in various things, and then converting them into something that's easily shareable through social media, on the website, etc. And this our goal with these stories is to provide a more relational view, a deeper view into what we're doing, because oftentimes it's kind of hard to describe what we're doing and how it's helpful. But this would give people kind of an inside look into what our work does in people's lives. And then the mutual benefit for lifeboat builders and for other people who are involved is it gives them more opportunity to reflect on what they're learning and on how to integrate that into their lives. So we're always looking for that mutual benefit. So our high level plan is one aspect is every event we do, every circle that we do, we typically have a takeaway round or a last round of sharing. And we would like to record those rounds and then get permission from the participants to share what they share out into the world. So we would just be asking for consent, extracting those recordings into separate videos, and also transcribing recordings that we could share as text-based testimonials. We also had an idea to emphasize the reflection time in mentoring check-ins, those kind of one-on-one meetings with between lifeboat builders and mentors, to record those reflections and share them out as testimonials. And then we also are proposing a new group event, which would be a shared reflection space, a reflection circle. And this is something we would coordinate across the guilds. Lots of different people would be welcome to join. So research and learning would have a primary role in kind of designing this event. What are the questions that we ask? What is the structure? And then outreach would get set up to extract the recordings from that event to convert them into testimonials. And we're thinking about asking our friend Kath, who is a big storytelling is kind of her thing, story collecting and storytelling. She's already expressed interest in kind of being a consultant and how we can weave the storytelling into what we're doing. So I'm planning to reach out to her to have a meeting about that. So all of these recordings will be shared with explicit permission that can be retracted at any time. So if we have something up on our website and suddenly someone's like, hey, I need to take that down, great, we'll take it down. And yeah, we'll just share them kind of anywhere in all of the spaces where we share things. And then what would success look like? So we'd be looking for positive responses on social media. So likes, comments, shares, things like that. People tagging us in, the other part of this is we want other people to share their own testimonials about being involved with the Lifeboat Academy. So I did a 6 conversation series, and here's a video of what I learned, So also enabling people to share their experiences. We would look for increased engagement in all our programming. So people signing up for lifeboat building support, for circles, for mentoring, as well as bringing more interest to the farmistery. Ideally, we'll have some testimonials about people's experiences on the farm that will entice people to want to get involved there. And then overall, we're looking for an increase in long-term engagement. So both people on the farm at the farmistery and also people who want lifeboat building support online. We're looking for that longer-term commitment to both receiving support as well as giving back to the organization in ways that make sense for them. So some of our concerns, the major concern is we want to record these experiences in a way that doesn't feel clunky. We want it to feel pretty seamless and organic and kind of weaving the recording of the reflections into what we're already doing. So it just doesn't feel awkward or disjointed. So focusing on ways to keep it relational and efficient. We talked about potentially doing interviews separate from circles. And it's like, well, if we can record parts of the circles, that's really the sort of in the moment nugget that would be really valuable to share, as well as having these other opportunities for reflection that we can share out as well. So in terms of the other kind of all of the guilds and people's roles, for farm food and housing, we're thinking about ways to encourage reflection for people who are staying at the pharmacery and capture those experiences. And just, yeah, encouraging reflection in the day to day, which I think there's already a lot of that with the morning circle and things like that. Finance and fundraising, ideally, would be making it easy for people to contribute financially and provide information about how people can get involved. Because as we're kind of bringing more interest in, we want to make sure at each stage or each part of the interest funnel, people have access to the information that they need to get involved and then stay involved. For research and learning, we're talking about how to guide the shared reflection spaces and the mentoring sessions. Kind of where are those spaces where people are reflecting, and then how can those be recorded in a way that feels easy and doable, and then kind of passing that all off to outreach and network to actually do the physical, you know, selecting recordings and sharing them out. Heart work will work on weaving the recordings into like focusing on those last rounds of sessions, making sure they're getting recorded, um, and just making sure that that feels seamless and organic. Um, and then for the lifeboat builders, hopefully they'll give permission to for us to use their reflections as testimonials, as well as actively participate in the mentoring practices and those spaces where the reflection is, you know, it's also for them as well. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of everybody. And then in terms of other projects, this will affect facilitation of pretty much every event. So making sure, you know, we already record most events, but making sure we have, we're pressing record, making sure we have people's permission, um, and keeping track of all of that. Um, and then how making sure that we're capturing people's experiences in a way that they can be shared easily. So we're not trying to do a lot of extra work, but kind of just add a little bit into what we're already doing. Um, and then ideally, if this project succeeds, then virtually all other guilds and projects would see a positive impact and see more success. So more participation, more positive testimonials, more long-term commitments, more pharmacery visits, and more money coming in to support infrastructure. In terms of resources, all we really need, at least that I can think of, are the Zoom account, a way to edit videos to make them shorter and shareable. Oh, and I didn't add this, but a way to transcribe videos. I'm very anti AI, so I know that there's AI software that will do it. And I also think that it would be cool to have people do it, but I also understand that it's a time suck. So there's always balancing those things. But yeah, does anyone want to add anything or have any clarifying questions?
Wow. Is my comment.
Thank you.
Well, and I wanted to add a little context, which is I see this also as we talk about Wei Wu Wei, what's the little effort that unlocks sort of natural effort.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that we often encounter is I want people to do more active and shared reflection, and it's just really hard to get uptake. And so this is an idea of how we can, like, I don't see eventually I would like to see it as an interactive process. So it isn't just we record the takeaways and we decide which ones get posted and we post them, but that there's a sort of feeding it back to the person where it's like, this was a really interesting thing that you said, you know, do you want to change it, add to it? How, you know, how do you feel about it? So it's not just getting the reflection out there, but it's also about making it easier for people to reflect themselves. Like Ronnie's saying, always looking for that mutual benefit. Because I think that, one of the things we don't do a lot as a culture is pause and step back and actually reflect on our experience. So anyhow, I just wanted to add that. Any other questions or comments? Questions for clarification? All right. So those are all of the proposals, and we are a little bit over time, and but we still have lots of time for lunch. We intentionally scheduled a nice big fat gap in the middle of these, both just for screen fatigue issues and also just to kind of let thoughts perk for a little bit. So if there are no more, oh, and does anyone, just off the top of your head, does anyone have an additional proposal? I just want to make sure I dot my I's and cross my T's. All right. So when we reconvene at 2 o'clock, we will formally be the coordination circle. All are invited to participate. And we will be weaving together these different questions and thoughts that have come up. And we'll be doing a double check. Are these the right proposals? Are we missing anything? Are we taking on a reasonable amount? And what are some of the things that we need to consider as we move forward? So with that, I think have a good lunch, and we'll see you at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.